I never thought I would be the villain of my own story. But here I am, sitting in an empty apartment that echoes with silence, holding a wedding ring that no longer belongs on my finger, confessing to a truth that I buried for years, until it clawed its way out and destroyed everything I claimed to love. My name is Marcus Cole. I am 34 years old, and I am the man who cheated on the person who loved me more blindly, more purely, more completely than anyone ever has or ever will. Not once, not in a moment of weakness that could be explained away, but deliberately, repeatedly, knowing exactly what I was doing, knowing exactly what I was risking, and somehow convincing myself that I could have everything, the devoted wife at home and the excitement that waited for me elsewhere. I was wrong, and the price I have paid for that arrogance, that selfishness, that complete disregard for the heart that was offered to me without conditions, that price has been my entire life. This is not a story I tell to gain sympathy. I do not deserve sympathy. This is a confession, raw, honest, and long overdue. This is the story of how I took the most beautiful gift a person can receive, the unconditional love of another human being, and I crushed it beneath the weight of my own ego, my own greed, and my own pathetic inability to recognize what I had until it was gone. If you are listening to this and you have someone who loves you the way Sarah loved me, I am begging you, put down whatever distraction is pulling you away from them. Look at them, really look at them, and understand that what you have is rare, what you have is sacred, and what you have can be lost in a single moment of weakness that you will spend the rest of your life trying to undo. Let me start from the beginning. Let me tell you about Sarah. I met her on a rainy Tuesday in October 7 years ago. I was 27, fresh off a promotion at Hartley Consulting, one of the top financial advisory firms in Manchester. I was ambitious, hungry, and convinced that success was the only metric that mattered in life. I had spent my 20s climbing the corporate ladder with single-minded focus, sacrificing relationships, friendships, and sleep on the altar of career advancement. I thought I was winning at life. I thought I had figured out the formula. That Tuesday, I was running late for a meeting with a client. The rain was coming down in sheets, and I had forgotten my umbrella. I ducked into a small cafe near Dean's Gate to wait out the worst of it, and that is when I saw her. She was sitting by the window, a cup of tea growing cold in front of her, lost in a book that looked like it had been read 100 times before. Her hair was dark brown, falling in loose waves past her shoulders. Her eyes were the color of autumn leaves, warm and gentle and filled with a quiet intelligence. She was wearing a simple cream-colored sweater and jeans, nothing that would stand out in a crowd. But something about her stopped me in my tracks. She looked up and caught me staring. And instead of the awkward look away that usually follows such moments, she smiled. It was the kind of smile that made you feel like the world had just gotten a little bit warmer. Like the rain outside did not matter anymore. Like nothing mattered except being the reason that smile stayed on her face. I walked over. I do not remember what I said. Something generic, something about the weather, something that should not have worked but somehow did. She laughed, a soft, genuine sound that made me want to hear it again immediately. Her name was Sarah Whitmore. She was 24 years old. She taught year 3 at a primary school in Didsbury. She loved classic literature, terrible puns, and rainy days because they gave her an excuse to stay inside and read. We talked for 2 hours. I missed my meeting entirely. I did not care. By the time the rain stopped, I had her phone number and a feeling in my chest that I had never experienced before. A lightness, a warmth, a sense that something significant had just begun. Our first date was 3 days later. Dinner at a small Italian restaurant that she suggested because it reminded her of a place her grandmother used to take her as a child. She ordered the pasta with too much garlic, and when I teased her about it, she pointed her fork at me and said that any man who could not handle garlic was not worth her time. I laughed harder than I had in months. Our second date was a walk through Heaton Park as the autumn leaves fell around us. She held my hand without asking, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I remember thinking that her hand fit perfectly in mine, like it had been designed to be there. Our third date was the night I realized I was falling in love with her. We were at her small flat, watching a film I cannot remember the name of, and she fell asleep with her head on my shoulder. I looked down at her face, peaceful and trusting, and I felt something shift inside me. Something that had been closed off for years cracked open. For the first time in my life, I wanted something more than success. I wanted her. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. Those 2 years were the happiest of my life. Sarah had this remarkable ability to make everything feel simple. When work stressed me out, she would remind me that it was just a job, that there was more to life than spreadsheets and client meetings. When I was short-tempered after a bad day, she would not take it personally. She would make me a cup of tea and sit with me in silence until I was ready to talk. When I succeeded, she celebrated with me. When I failed, she was there to catch me. She loved me without conditions, without demands, without keeping score. I proposed to her on a beach in Cornwall during a weekend getaway. I had planned an elaborate dinner, a speech I had practiced for weeks, a sunset that was supposed to be perfect. But the restaurant lost our reservation. I forgot half the speech, and the sunset was obscured by clouds. I stood there on the sand, fumbling with the ring box, feeling like everything was going wrong. Sarah just looked at me with those warm eyes and said, "Marcus, just ask me." So I did, and she said yes before I even finished the question. We were married 6 months later in a small ceremony with our closest friends and family. My mother cried. Sarah's brother Thomas gave a speech about how he had never seen his sisters so happy. I stood at the altar and watched her walk toward me, and I remember thinking that I was the luckiest man alive. I was. I just did not appreciate it until it was too late. The first 3 years of our marriage were wonderful. We bought a house in a quiet suburb. Sarah continued teaching, coming home with stories about her students that made me laugh and reminded me that the world was full of innocent joy. I continued climbing at Hartley Consulting, making senior associate and then manager. We talked about having children someday. We built a life together. And then I met Victoria. Victoria Chin started at Hartley Consulting in my 4th year of marriage. She was brought in as a senior analyst, part of a restructuring effort that our CEO, Richard Blackwell, had initiated to bring fresh talent into the firm. She was 29, brilliant, ambitious, and undeniably beautiful. She had sharp features, dark eyes that seemed to see through pretense, and a confidence that bordered on intimidating. From the first day, I noticed her. Everyone noticed her. She commanded attention in every room she walked into. But I told myself that noticing was not a crime. I was married, not blind. I appreciated her professionally. That was all. Looking back, I can see how naive that was. How dangerous. The thing about affairs, and I hate that I can speak about this with any kind of authority, is that they rarely begin with a single dramatic moment. There is no lightning bolt, no sudden decision to betray everything you have built. It happens slowly, gradually, like erosion, like a crack in a foundation that goes unnoticed until the whole structure collapses. Victoria and I started working together on a major project, a restructuring deal for a client that required long hours and close collaboration. We spent late nights in the office, reviewing documents, debating strategies, ordering takeaway food, and eating it at our desks. She was sharp. She challenged me intellectually in ways that I had not experienced in years. She laughed at my jokes, asked about my background, seemed genuinely interested in who I was beyond my title. I told myself this was just professional respect, just workplace camaraderie. But then the compliments started. Small at first. She noticed when I wore a new tie. She said I had a way of explaining complex concepts that made them seem simple. She mentioned that she admired how driven I was, how focused. The compliments felt good. They made me feel seen in a way I had not felt in a long time. And here is the thing I am most ashamed to admit. Sarah had never stopped complimenting me. Sarah had never stopped making me feel valued. But somewhere along the way, I had started taking her words for granted. When she said she was proud of me, I heard it as background noise. When Victoria said the same thing, it felt like a revelation. That is on me. That is entirely on me. I had grown complacent in my marriage, comfortable in Sarah's love, so comfortable that I stopped actively appreciating it. I had started looking for external validation because I had forgotten how to be grateful for the validation I already had. The first line I crossed was 6 months after Victoria joined the firm. It was after a successful client dinner, and a group of us went out for drinks to celebrate. One by one, our colleagues left until it was just Victoria and me at the bar, talking and laughing and drinking more than we should have. She put her hand on my arm, not in an overt way, but in a way that lingered. And instead of moving away, I let it stay. I let myself feel the warmth of her touch. I let myself imagine, just for a moment, what it would be like to lean in. I did not kiss her that night. I told myself that was a victory. I told myself that I had maintained my integrity, that I had not actually done anything wrong. But I had. The betrayal had already begun. Because in that moment, I had allowed myself to want something outside my marriage. I had opened a door that should have remained locked. The next few weeks were a war inside my head. Part of me knew that what I was feeling was dangerous. Part of me knew that I should distance myself from Victoria, should ask to be reassigned to a different project, should tell Sarah about the attraction before it became something worse. That part of me was the good part, the loyal part, the part that loved my wife and remembered what she meant to me. But there was another part, the selfish part, the part that enjoyed feeling desired by someone new, the part that craved excitement and novelty and the thrill of something forbidden. That part whispered to me that I could handle this, that a little flirtation was harmless, that as long as I never actually did anything, it was not cheating. I listened to the wrong voice. Victoria and I continued working together. The late nights continued. The drinks continued. The touches became more frequent, the conversations more personal. She told me about her childhood, her ambitions, her fears. I told her things I had never told anyone, insecurities I had hidden even from Sarah. It felt intimate. It felt special. It was 3 months after that first night at the bar when we kissed for the first time. We were alone in the office, finishing up a presentation for a client meeting the next day. It was past midnight. The building was empty. I made some joke that I do not remember, and she laughed, and suddenly she was close to me, closer than she had ever been, and I could smell her perfume and see the light in her eyes, and before I could stop myself, I kissed her. She kissed me back. And in that moment, everything I had built with Sarah, every promise, every vow, every quiet night curled up on the sofa, it all became a lie. I wish I could tell you that I stopped there, that the kiss was a wake-up call, that I pulled away and realized what I was risking and never let it happen again. But that would be a lie too. The affair lasted 8 months. 8 months of sneaking around. 8 months of lies. 8 months of looking Sarah in the eyes and telling her I loved her while betraying her in the worst possible way. I became an expert at deception. I learned to cover my tracks, to delete messages, to invent excuses for late nights and business trips that never happened. I learned to compartmentalize, to be one person with Victoria and another person with Sarah. I convinced myself that as long as Sarah did not know, as long as she was still happy, I was not really hurting her. The twisted logic of infidelity. The lies we tell ourselves to justify the unjustifiable. Sarah never suspected a thing. And that is what haunts me the most. Because it was not that she was blind or naive or stupid. It was that she trusted me completely. She believed in me so totally, so absolutely, that the idea of me betraying her never even entered her mind. When I said I was working late, she believed me. When I said the business trip was unavoidable, she packed my suitcase and kissed me goodbye. When I came home after being with Victoria, she would smile and ask about my day, genuinely interested, genuinely caring. She loved me blindly, and I used that love as a weapon against her. There were moments when the guilt almost broke me. I would be sitting at the dinner table with Sarah, listening to her talk about her students or her plans for the weekend, and I would feel this wave of nausea, this crushing weight of what I was doing. I would look at her face, so open and trusting, and I would want to confess everything, to beg for forgiveness, to end the madness. But I never did, because I was a coward, because I was selfish, because I wanted to keep both lives running simultaneously, even though every day the strain was increasing, even though every day the foundation was cracking further. My best friend, Daniel, was the first to notice something was wrong. Daniel and I had been friends since university. He knew me better than almost anyone, and he had watched my relationship with Sarah from the very beginning. He had been my best man at our wedding. He and his wife were our closest friends. Daniel pulled me aside one evening after a dinner party at our house. Sarah was in the kitchen with his wife, laughing about something, and Daniel cornered me in the hallway with an expression I had never seen from him before. Concern, and something else. Suspicion. "Marcus," he said quietly, "I do not know what is going on with you, but something is off. Sarah deserves better than whatever this is." I felt my blood run cold. "What are you talking about? I have seen the way you look at your phone. The way you disappeared for an hour during dinner claiming you had a work call. The way you are not really present anymore. You are here, but you are not here." He paused. "If you are doing something stupid, stop it now, before it is too late." I should have listened to him. I should have heard the warning in his words and let it shake me out of the fog I was living in. Instead, I felt defensive, angry. How dare he accuse me? How dare he assume the worst? You do not know what you are talking about, I said, my voice cold. Mind your own business. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Then he shook his head and walked away. He did not bring it up again. But something changed between us that night. A distance that I had created. One of many distances I was creating. The affair with Victoria was not just physical. That is something people do not always understand about infidelity. There is an emotional component that is almost more destructive than the physical betrayal. I was giving Victoria parts of myself that belonged to Sarah. I was sharing my thoughts, my dreams, my vulnerabilities with another woman. I was building an intimacy that I was simultaneously neglecting at home. And Victoria encouraged it. She made me feel like I was special, like what we had was different, like we were two people who had found something real amidst the constraints of conventional relationships. She talked about the future, our future, as if it were a certainty. She mentioned, casually at first and then more directly, that we could not keep living double lives forever, that eventually I would have to choose. I realized now that Victoria was not in love with me. She was in love with the idea of what I represented, success, status, the thrill of taking something that belonged to someone else. She was playing a game, and I was too caught up in my own selfish desires to see it. But at the time, I believed her. I believed that what we had was special. I even started to convince myself that leaving Sarah might be the right thing to do, that everyone would be better off if I stopped living a lie. The thing about lies, though, is that they have a way of unraveling. You can only spin so many plates before one of them falls. The truth came out on a Thursday evening in March. The weather was cold, the kind of cold that gets into your bones and reminds you that winter is not quite finished with you yet. I had told Sarah I had a client dinner and would be home late. In reality, I was with Victoria at her flat, as I had been so many times before. What I did not know was that Sarah's brother Thomas was in the city that evening. He was passing through on business and had decided to surprise his sister with dinner. When he arrived at our house and found Sarah alone, confused about my supposed client dinner that she had not heard about, Thomas grew suspicious. Thomas had never fully trusted me. He had always been protective of Sarah, skeptical of the ambitious corporate man who had swept his sister off her feet. He had kept his concerns to himself over the years, but he had never stopped watching. That evening, he decided to do what I had thought no one would ever do. He checked up on me. He contacted a mutual acquaintance at my firm, casually asking about the big client dinner happening that night. The acquaintance was confused. There was no client dinner. In fact, I had left the office early that afternoon. Thomas did not tell Sarah what he had discovered. Not yet. Instead, he started digging. Over the next 2 weeks, while I continued living my double life, blissfully unaware that the walls were closing in, Thomas gathered evidence. He hired a private investigator. He accessed records that I had thought were hidden. He built a case against me, piece by piece, photograph by photograph, message by message. And then, when he had everything he needed, he told Sarah. I came home from work on a Tuesday evening, expecting a normal night, dinner, television, maybe some reading before bed. The comfortable routine of a life I had taken for granted. Instead, I found Sarah sitting in the living room, alone, in the dark. The lights were off. The curtains were drawn. She was sitting on the sofa where we had spent so many evenings together, but everything about her posture was wrong. She was completely still, like a statue, like something that used to be alive but was not anymore. Sarah? I said, my voice uncertain. Why are you sitting in the dark? She did not answer. She just reached over and turned on the lamp beside her. That is when I saw her face. And I knew. She had been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen, the warm amber color I loved dulled by tears that had flowed for hours. But it was not the tears that stopped me in my tracks. It was the expression, the complete and utter devastation. The look of someone whose entire world had collapsed, who had been forced to face a reality so painful that it had fundamentally changed who she was. On the coffee table in front of her was a manila envelope. Even from across the room, I could see photographs spilling out of it. Photographs of me and Victoria. Photographs of us leaving her flat. Photographs of us together in places I had thought were secret. Sarah, I started, but she held up her hand. Do not. Her voice was quiet, steady, but underneath, I could hear it breaking. Do not lie to me anymore. I cannot take any more lies. I stood there, frozen, as the full weight of the moment crashed over me. All the careful compartmentalizing, all the lies and excuses and hidden messages, it was all out in the open now. There was nowhere left to hide. How long? She asked. I could not answer. How long, Marcus? 8 months, I whispered. She closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. 8 months, she repeated, as if trying to make the words make sense. 8 months of our marriage. 8 months of you coming home to me. 8 months of me thinking we were happy. Sarah, I asked you, she said, her voice rising slightly. 3 months ago. I asked you if everything was okay. You were distant. You were distracted. I thought maybe it was work stress. I asked you directly if there was anything wrong, anything you needed to tell me. And do you remember what you said? I remembered. God help me, I remembered. You said everything was fine. You said you loved me. You said I was imagining things. She opened her eyes and looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in those warm eyes that I had never seen before. Anger. Cold, hard anger. You looked me in the face and you lied. And then you went to her. Sarah, please let me explain. Explain what? Now her voice did break, the composure shattering like glass. Explain how you could do this to me. Explain how you could lie to me every single day for almost a year. Explain how you could come home from being with her and sleep next to me like nothing had happened. I had no answers. There were no explanations that could make this better. There was nothing I could say that would undo what I had done. I trusted you, she said, and those 3 words carried more pain than anything else she had said. I trusted you with my whole heart. When people warned me about ambitious men, about men who put careers first, I defended you. When my brother expressed concerns, I told him he did not know you like I did. I believed in you, Marcus. I believed that what we had was real. It was real, I said desperately. What we have is real. Sarah, I love you. I know I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. That has never changed. She laughed. It was a hollow, broken sound that made my stomach turn. You love me? This is what your love looks like. Lies and betrayal and humiliation. She shook her head slowly. I used to think I knew what love was. I used to think it was what I felt for you. But now I do not know anything anymore. I moved toward her, wanting to hold her, to comfort her, to somehow make this right. But she stood up and stepped back, putting distance between us. Do not touch me, she said. I cannot bear to have you touch me right now. Those words cut deeper than anything she could have said. Sarah, who had always reached for me, who had held my hand without asking, who had made physical affection feel like the most natural thing in the world, she could not bear to have me touch her. Because of what I had done. The conversation that followed lasted for hours. She asked questions I did not want to answer. She demanded details that made me hate myself more with every word. She wanted to know when it started, how it started, where we went, what I said about her, whether I had planned to leave. I answered everything. I had lost the right to privacy, to protection. If she wanted to know, she deserved to know. By the time the sun came up, I was sitting on the floor of our living room, and Sarah was upstairs packing a bag. She was going to stay with her brother. She could not be in this house with me. She could not look at me. I begged her not to go. I got down on my knees and begged, tears streaming down my face, promising I would do anything, be anything, if she would just stay and let me make this right. She paused at the door, bag in hand, and looked back at me. And in that look, I saw the death of something precious. The trust we had built over 7 years, the love I had thought was indestructible, it was gone. What remained was just ashes. I do not know if I can ever forgive you, she said quietly. I do not know if I want to. But right now, I need to get away from you. I need to remember who I am without you. Because you have made me feel like I do not even know myself anymore. And then she left. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. I moved through each day like a ghost, going through the motions of work and life, while feeling nothing but a hollow emptiness where my heart used to be. I could not sleep. I could not eat. I could not focus on anything except the memory of Sarah's face, the devastation in her eyes, the way she had looked at me like I was a stranger. Victoria tried to contact me. She sent messages, left voicemails, even showed up at my office. She wanted to know what had happened, whether this meant we could finally be together openly. She seemed almost excited by the development, as if Sarah's pain was just a necessary step toward our happy ending. That was when I finally saw her clearly. The woman I had risked everything for. The woman I had thought understood me better than anyone. She had no empathy, no remorse, no understanding of the devastation we had caused. She saw Sarah as an obstacle that had been removed, not as a human being whose life had been shattered. I ended things with Victoria that day. I told her I wanted nothing more to do with her, that what we had done was unforgivable, that I could not look at her without feeling sick. She did not take it well. She threatened to expose me further, to make sure everyone knew what I had done. She said I would regret choosing a boring housewife over someone like her. But I was beyond threats at that point. What more could she take from me? I had already lost everything that mattered. The truth spread through my life like wildfire. My colleagues found out. Richard Blackwell, the CEO who had always admired my drive and focus, called me into his office and told me, with barely concealed disappointment, that my judgment was in question. My mother found out and wept on the phone, asking where she had gone wrong, how she had raised a son who could do this. My friendship with Daniel, already strained, collapsed entirely. He told me he could not be friends with someone who would treat Sarah that way. He told me I disgusted him. The karma, as some would call it, was swift and merciless. Victoria, furious at being discarded, did not keep quiet. She spoke to anyone who would listen, twisting the story to make herself the victim, painting me as a predator who had pursued her relentlessly. Her version of events reached HR, and suddenly I was facing an investigation. Not for infidelity. The company did not care about that, but for allegations of inappropriate behavior with a subordinate. The power dynamics she had conveniently ignored while we were together became her weapon against me. I was placed on administrative leave. The career I had sacrificed so much for, the success I had pursued with such single-minded focus, was crumbling around me. I watched helplessly as years of work, years of climbing, years of proving myself, all of it dissolved because of my own choices. But even that was nothing compared to losing Sarah. She filed for divorce 2 months after she discovered the truth. I did not contest it. How could I? I signed every document she asked me to sign. I gave her the house, the savings, everything she wanted. It was the least I could do. It would never be enough to make up for what I had taken from her. The last time I saw her was at the final court hearing. She looked different, thinner, older. The lightness that had drawn me to her in that cafe 7 years ago was gone. She moved like someone carrying an invisible weight, someone who had learned that the world was not as kind as she had believed. She did not look at me during the proceedings. Not once. When it was over and we were legally no longer husband and wife, she stood up and walked out of the courtroom without a backward glance. I called her name. She did not stop. Her brother was waiting for her outside. He saw me watching and positioned himself between us, a physical barrier. But before he led her away, he turned and looked at me with an expression that I will never forget. "She trusted you," Thomas said, his voice low and cold. "She loved you with everything she had. And you threw it away for what? For excitement? For some fantasy? I hope it was worth it, Marcus. I hope whatever you got from that woman was worth destroying my sister." I had no answer. There was no answer. Sarah got the house, and I moved into a small flat across the city. The silence there was overwhelming. No laughter, no warmth, no Sarah falling asleep on my shoulder during a film. Just emptiness and the endless replaying of my mistakes. I spiraled. Without work to distract me, without Sarah to anchor me, I fell into patterns I had always criticized in others. I drank too much. I isolated myself. I pushed away the few people who still tried to reach out. I told myself it was punishment, that I deserved to suffer, but really it was just avoidance. I could not face what I had done, so I drowned it instead. Rock bottom came 6 months after the divorce, when I found myself standing on the balcony of my flat at 3 in the morning, drunk, looking down at the street below and wondering if anyone would even notice if I disappeared. That thought scared me enough to finally seek help. I started therapy the following week. I sat in a counselor's office and spoke about the affair, about Sarah, about the destruction I had caused. I spoke about my childhood, my relationship with my parents, my desperate need for external validation. I dug into the parts of myself I had always avoided, the parts that had led me to make such devastating choices. It was in therapy that I finally began to understand why I had done what I did. Not excuses. There are no excuses, but explanations. I had grown up in a home where love was conditional on achievement. My father, absent for most of my childhood, reappeared only to criticize or compare me unfavorably to others. My mother, loving but emotionally unavailable, taught me that approval had to be earned, never assumed. I learned early that my worth was tied to external metrics, grades, promotions, praise from authority figures. When I met Sarah, her unconditional love was so foreign to me that I did not know how to receive it. On some level, I did not believe I deserved it. So instead of accepting her love and letting it fill the empty places inside me, I kept searching for validation elsewhere. Victoria offered what felt familiar, approval that had to be won, excitement that felt earned. She fit the dysfunctional pattern I understood, while Sarah's steady, reliable love felt like something that would inevitably be taken away. So I sabotaged it myself. Before she could realize I was not worthy, I made sure to prove it. Understanding this did not fix anything. It did not bring Sarah back. It did not undo the pain I had caused. But it gave me a foundation to start rebuilding, to become the kind of person who would never make such choices again. Too late for my marriage, but maybe not too late for my life. Recovery was slow. I returned to work at a different firm, a smaller company where no one knew my history. I kept my head down, focused on doing good work without the obsessive drive that had defined my earlier career. I repaired my relationship with my mother, who forgave me even though I struggled to forgive myself. I tried to reconnect with Daniel, but he was not ready. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. I dated occasionally, years later, but nothing stuck. Every time I started to get close to someone, I saw Sarah's face. I saw the trust in her eyes turning to devastation. I saw what my choices had done, and I could not bring myself to risk causing that pain again. For years after the divorce, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Sarah had remarried. His name was James. He was a doctor, someone she had met through a friend. They were expecting a child. She was happy. When I heard this news, I sat in my flat for a long time, just breathing. There was grief. Yes, grief for the life we should have had, for the children we had talked about, for the future I had destroyed. But there was also something else. Relief. Gratitude. If Sarah could find happiness again, if she could trust again after what I had done, then maybe the damage was not permanent. Maybe she had healed in ways I had not allowed myself to believe were possible. I never reached out to her. She had made it clear she did not want contact, and I respected that. The least I could do was respect her boundaries, something I had failed to do so spectacularly during our marriage. But I wrote her a letter. I did not send it. I never intended to, but I wrote it because I needed to put the words somewhere outside my own head. The letter said everything I wished I had said when I had the chance. It apologized, not just for the affair, but for all the smaller failures that led up to it. The times I took her for granted, the times I prioritized work over her, the times I failed to show up the way a husband should. It thanked her for the years of happiness she gave me, even though I had repaid that gift with betrayal. It wished her well in her new life, with her new husband, with the child on the way. It said that I would spend the rest of my life trying to become the man she had believed me to be, even though she would never see it. I still have that letter. I read it sometimes, when I need to remind myself of what I lost and why. It keeps me honest. It keeps me from ever again thinking that I can have everything without consequences. This is where my story ends. Not with redemption. I do not think I have earned that, but with awareness, with accountability, with the ongoing work of becoming better than I was. I live alone now. I have work I find meaningful, friends I have made carefully, a life that is quieter and smaller than the one I once envisioned, but more honest. I have not been in a serious relationship since Sarah. Some might see that as sad, but I see it as appropriate. I am not sure I trust myself yet. I am not sure I have fully repaired whatever was broken inside me that allowed me to hurt someone so completely. What I know is this: I was given a gift. Pure, unconditional love from a woman who saw the best in me, even when I could not see it myself. And I squandered it. I traded it for something cheap and temporary and ultimately meaningless. By the time I understood what I had lost, it was too late to get it back. If you are listening to this and you recognize yourself in any part of my story, the wandering eyes, the harmless flirtation, the thrill of attention from someone new, I am begging you to stop. Stop now, before you cross lines that cannot be uncrossed. Talk to your partner. Seek counseling. Do whatever it takes to address what is really going on, because there is always something going on. The affair is never just about the other person. It is about something inside you that needs to be faced. And if you are like Sarah, if you are loving someone blindly, giving them everything, trusting them completely, Please do not let my story make you paranoid. Most people are not like me. Most people honor the trust they are given. But if you see signs, if something feels wrong, trust your instincts. You deserve honesty. You deserve a partner who values you as much as you value them. I cheated the person who loved me most. I lied to her, betrayed her, and destroyed the most beautiful thing I had ever been part of. And I will carry that weight for the rest of my life. Some mistakes cannot be undone. Some damage cannot be repaired. But some lessons, learned at the highest possible cost, can still serve a purpose. I tell my story not for sympathy, not for absolution, but as a warning. This is what happens when you take love for granted. This is what happens when you let ego and selfishness override gratitude and loyalty. This is the price of treating someone's heart like it is yours to break. Sarah, if by some impossible chance you ever hear these words, I am sorry. I am so deeply, permanently sorry. Not for getting caught, for everything I did before that made getting caught inevitable. You deserve better than me. You deserve every happiness you have now. And I hope the love you have found heals all the wounds I caused. I was not worthy of you. I know that now, but knowing it does not make it easier to bear. Some nights, I still dream about that rainy Tuesday in October. The cafe, the book, the smile that changed my life. I dream about walking toward her, about saying something that made her laugh, about the years of happiness that followed. And then I wake up, alone, and I remember how it ended. My name is Marcus Cole. I am 34 years old. And I am the man who cheated on the person who loved me most blindly of all. I have told you my story. I have confessed everything. Whether you judge me harshly or find some understanding in my weakness, I accept it. Because the harshest judge I face is myself. And that court is always in session. This is what betrayal costs. This is what happens when you chase shadows instead of holding on to the light. This is my burden, my lesson, my truth. And now, finally, it is told. I do not know if speaking it aloud changes anything. The past remains unchanged. Sarah remains with someone else, living a life I forfeited the right to share. The consequences of my choices continue to unfold, day after day, in the quiet loneliness of a life built on ruins. But perhaps this confession serves one purpose. Perhaps someone listening will hear my story and make a different choice. Perhaps someone will recognize the early warning signs. The emotional distance from their partner, the growing attraction to someone else, the rationalization that a little attention is harmless, and choose to turn back before crossing the point of no return. If that happens, if even one person is spared the devastation I caused, then this confession was worth giving. That is my hope. It is a small hope, but it is what I have. The rain is falling outside as I finish speaking, just like it was falling that day in October when I first saw Sarah. The world moves in circles, and the rain reminds me of beginnings and endings, of what was and what could have been. I close my eyes, and I remember her smile. The smile that made me feel like the world had gotten warmer. The smile I destroyed. I loved her. I truly did. But love without action, without integrity, without daily commitment, that is not love at all. It is just a word. And words mean nothing if your actions betray them. I betrayed mine. I betrayed her. I betrayed myself. This is my confession. This is my truth. And now, finally, the unsaid has been echoed. I sit here in the silence that follows confession, and I understand that there is no dramatic conclusion, no redemption arc that ties everything up neatly. Life is not like that. Some stories do not have happy endings. Some people do not get what they want. And some of us spend our remaining years living with the consequences of choices we cannot undo. But there is this awareness. There is the knowledge that I failed, and the determination to learn from that failure. There is the ongoing work of becoming someone who would never make those choices again. It is not redemption. It is something smaller and harder. It is just trying every day to be better than I was. Sarah moved on. She found happiness, love, a family, everything we had once dreamed of together. She built a beautiful life without me, and that life is her triumph, her proof that what I did could not ultimately destroy her. I, on the other hand, remain, not quite whole, not quite healed, but still standing, still learning, still trying. That will have to be enough. Because sometimes, the greatest lesson life teaches us is the value of what we lose. And sometimes, we only learn that lesson after it is too late. My wife loved me blindly. She trusted me completely. She gave me everything I could have wanted, and I threw it away. I see her face in my memories, the warmth in her eyes, the gentleness in her touch, the way she laughed at my terrible jokes, the way she made everything feel like home. I will carry her with me forever, not as a wound, but as a reminder. A reminder of what love looks like when it is real. A reminder of what I am capable of destroying. A reminder to never, ever take for granted the precious and fragile gift of someone's heart. This is my story. This is my confession. This is the truth I have finally spoken aloud after years of silence. And now it is done. My name is Marcus Cole. I cheated the person who loved me most blindly of all, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to become worthy of a love like hers, even though I know I may never receive it again. That is my punishment. That is my path. That is my truth. Thank you for listening.